I spent 8 years wiring $384,000 to my parents, convinced I was saving them from ruin. I denied myself a life to be their safety net. Then came the phone call where I heard them laughing, mocking me for being their gullible little pension plan. I didn't explode. I just went quiet, audited every cent, and replied with one sentence that turned their laughter into a subpoena. The view from my office on the 32nd floor of the Sterling Tower in Harbor City was a grid of gray and steel, softened only by the fog rolling in off the harbor. I liked the view. It was orderly. It made sense. Down there, the traffic moved in predictable patterns, guided by lights and lanes, a system of rules that everyone agreed to follow so nobody got hurt. My life was supposed to be like that. I was 33 years old, a senior risk analyst for a major insurance firm. My entire career was built on the ability to look at a chaotic set of variables, weather patterns, market fluctuations, human error, and calculate the probability of disaster. I was good at it. I could spot a fracture in a corporate merger from 3 spreadsheets away. I could tell you the statistical likelihood of a cargo ship sinking in the Atlantic based on the age of its hull and the captain's sleep schedule. But when my phone buzzed on the mahogany desk, vibrating against the wood with a persistent, rhythmic hum, I didn't calculate the risk. I just answered it. "Maddie, honey, it's Dad." Gordon Brooks had a voice that could sell sand to a desert nomad. It was warm, enveloping, and laced with a perpetual optimism that made you feel like you were the only person in the world he wanted to talk to. But after 8 years of these calls, I had learned to listen for the tremor underneath the warmth. "Hi, Dad," I said, minimizing the actuarial table on my screen. "Is everything okay?" There was a pause, a heavy sigh. I could hear the faint sound of the television in the background, probably the local news in Silver Pine, Ohio. "It is just a rough month." "Maddie," he said, "the business. You know how the supply chain has been. We are just a little short on the mortgage this month. And your mother? Well, she has those copays for her back therapy." I closed my eyes. I knew the script. It was never a demand. It was always a confession. It was designed to make me feel like the strong one, the capable one, the savior. How much, I asked. "Just 4,000, he said quickly. "Just to clear the hurdle. We will get you back next month. I promise. $4,000. It was not a small amount. It was a significant portion of my monthly take-home pay, even with my salary, but the alternative was the image my mind immediately conjured: my parents, in their 60s, being evicted from the house I grew up in. The shame of it, the guilt. "I will wire it tonight," I said. "You are an angel." "Maddie," he said, the relief palpable in his voice, "I do not know what we would do without you. Tell your mother I love her." Okay. I hung up and stared at the gray city. I felt a familiar hollowness in my chest, a mix of pride and resentment that had become my baseline emotional state. I was the responsible one. I was the one who made it out of Silver Pine, the one who went to college on scholarships, the one who landed the high-paying job in the city. That night, I opened my laptop in my apartment. My apartment was nice, but it was sparse. I had lived there for 4 years, yet I still hadn't bought real curtains. The blinds came with the place, curtains cost money, and I never seemed to have enough of it to justify the expense. I logged into my bank account. The balance was healthy, but only because I lived like a monk. I clicked on the transfer tab. I selected the recipient, Gordon and Elaine Brooks. I typed in $4,000. Confirm transfer, the screen asked. I clicked yes. Then, I opened a separate window. It was a spreadsheet titled Simply Family Support. It was password protected. I entered the date, the amount, and the reason my father had given mortgage and medical. I scrolled down to the bottom. The sum total at the bottom right corner stared back at me. It was a number that made my stomach turn. A number that could have been a down payment on a house, a wedding, a travel fund, a life. It was just over $300,000 at that point. I told myself it was fine. I told myself that this was what families did. They helped each other. They had sacrificed for me, hadn't they? They had paid for my piano lessons when I was 8. They had driven me to debate club. They had put food on the table during the lean years when Dad's contracting business was slow. I was just paying them back. The pattern solidified into a rigid architecture over the next few months. It was no longer sporadic. It was structural. The requests came with the regularity of a utility bill. First of the month, Maddie, the property tax bill came in higher than we thought. 15th of the month, Maddie, the transmission on the truck went. I need it for work. I stopped asking questions. I just paid. I set up an automatic transfer for the baseline $4,000. And then I fielded the overages as they came, to the outside world. The Brooks family was a portrait of gratitude. On Facebook, my mother, Elaine, was prolific. She would post photos of me from my graduation, or a screenshot of a text I sent, with captions that garnered hundreds of likes. Our daughter is our rock. She would write, "So blessed to have raised such a caring soul. God is good." Her friends in Silver Pine would comment underneath, "You raised her right. Elaine, what a blessing to have children who care." I would read these comments late at night, alone in my apartment, eating takeout noodles because I didn't want to spend money on groceries that might spoil. The praise felt like a receipt. It was the only tangible return on my investment. If I stopped paying, the posts would stop, and if the posts stopped, what would replace them? The fear of that silence, or worse, the fear of a different kind of post one about abandonment, about ungrateful children, kept my finger on the transfer button. My life in Harbor City began to narrow. It happened slowly, like the walls of a room inching inward. My friends were moving forward. Sarah, who worked in marketing down the hall, bought a condo in the Navy Yard. She invited me to the housewarming. "You should look in the building." "Maddie," she told me, pouring wine into a glass, "the rates are great right now, and with your salary, you could get a place with a balcony." I smiled, taking a sip of the wine. "Maybe next year," I said. I am keeping my options open. I wasn't keeping my options open. I was keeping my bank account open for my parents. I couldn't explain to Sarah that my debt-to-income ratio was skewed not by student loans, which I had paid off aggressively, but by the shadow mortgage I was paying on a house in Ohio that I didn't own. Then there was Mark. Mark was an architect I met at a networking event. He was kind, funny, and he had a way of looking at buildings that made me appreciate them. We went on 3 dates. On the 4th date, he suggested a weekend trip to a vineyard in Vermont. It would be about $600 for the weekend. He said, "But the experience is worth it. $600. That was the exact amount my mother had asked for 2 days prior for a dental emergency. I had sent it. My discretionary fund for the month was at 0. "I can't this weekend," I said. "Work is crazy." He tried to reschedule. I made another excuse. Eventually, he stopped asking. It was easier to be alone than to have to explain why a senior risk analyst couldn't afford a weekend in Vermont. I told myself I didn't like him that much anyway. I added the $600 to the spreadsheet. Under reason, I wrote dental. Then, the promotion happened. It was October. The leaves in Harbor City were turning a brilliant, burning red. My boss called me into his office and told me I was being promoted to lead analyst. "It comes with a $25,000 bonus," he said, sliding a letter across the desk. "You earned it." "Madeline?" I stared at the check. $25,000. For the first time in years. I felt a spark of true selfishness. I could buy a car. I could put a down payment on that condo Sarah talked about. I could go to Paris. I had always wanted to go to Paris. I deposited the check on a Friday. On Saturday morning, my mother called. "Maddie." "Are you sitting down?" she asked. Her voice was thin, trembling. "What is it?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. "It is the business," she said. "Your father. He made a mistake. A supplier is threatening to sue us. They say we owe them back payments. If we do not pay by Monday, they are going to put a lien on the house. They will take everything." "Maddie." I gripped the phone. "How much?" I asked. $24,000, she whispered. The number hung in the air. 24,000. My bonus was 25,000. It was almost perfect. "Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That is, That is a lot of money. Can I see the demand letter? Can I talk to the supplier? There was a sudden shuffling on the line, and then my father's voice cut in. He sounded frantic, breathless. Maddie, we do not have time for paperwork, he said. These guys are serious. They are coming on Monday. I messed up. Okay, I know I messed up. But I cannot lose the house. I cannot let your mother lose her home. Please. The desperation in his voice triggered that old, deep wire in my brain. The wire that said, you are the safety net. If you fail, they fall. I have some money. I said, I just got a bonus. Oh, thank God. My father breathed. Thank God. I knew we could count on you. It is a loan. Maddie, a short-term loan. As soon as the big contract comes through in the spring, you get every penny back. I sent the money. I watched the balance in my account spike and then drop back down to its usual. Safe, mediocre level. The Paris trip evaporated. The condo vanished. I opened the spreadsheet. I typed business legal threat. I typed $24,000. But as I typed it, a cold little thought pricked the back of my neck. How did they know? They didn't know I got a bonus. I hadn't told them. It was just a coincidence. It had to be a coincidence. The universe was cruel, but it wasn't that precise. I pushed the thought away. I buried it under the numbers. Numbers were safe. Feelings were dangerous. As winter set in, the requests kept coming. But I started to notice patterns I had previously ignored. I was a risk analyst. Looking for patterns was literally what I was paid to do. It was inevitable that I would eventually apply my professional eye to my personal life, no matter how hard I tried not to. The requests spiked around holidays. November, $3,000 for a furnace repair right before Thanksgiving. December, $5,000 for property taxes right before Christmas. February, $2,000 for a deductible on a car accident right before Valentine's Day. The story shifted, too. In early November, my mother mentioned the furnace needed a new blower motor. 2 weeks later, when I asked if the house was warm, she said, "Oh, yes, the new insulation made a huge difference." I frowned at the phone. I thought it was the furnace. She laughed, a nervous, fluttering sound. Well, yes, that too. It was a whole heating system overhaul. You know how Dad is. He wants everything perfect. I let it go. Confronting them felt like an accusation, and accusing them felt like a betrayal. If I questioned them, I was saying I didn't trust them. And if I didn't trust my own parents, who did I have? By spring, I was exhausted. The emotional toll of being the designated checkbook was wearing me down. I decided I needed to see them. I hadn't been to Silver Pine in almost a year. I told myself it was just a visit, but deep down, I wanted to see where the money was going. I wanted to see the new furnace. I wanted to see the repaired truck. I drove down on a Friday. Silver Pine was a small town, the kind where the trees were old and the houses were set back from the road on wide. Green lawns. My parents' house was a 2-story colonial with white siding and black shutters. It looked impeccable. My parents met me at the door. They looked good, healthy. My father had a tan. My mother was wearing a cashmere sweater I didn't recognize. "Maddie." My father boomed, pulling me into a bear hug. "Look at you." The big city executive returns. My mother kissed my cheek. "You look tired." "Honey, are you eating enough?" "I am fine, Mom," I said, stepping into the hallway. The house smelled of lemon polish and pot roast. It was warm, comforting. For the first hour, I let myself relax. I let myself be the daughter. We sat in the living room and drank iced tea. They asked about work, but their eyes glazed over when I talked about risk mitigation. They were more interested in whether I had met anyone. No one special. I said, looking down at my tea. Later, while my mother was finishing dinner, I wandered into the kitchen. I noticed the corner near the breakfast nook. It had been remodeled. There were new quartz countertops, a new backsplash, and a high-end espresso machine gleaming on the counter. "This looks great," I said, running my hand over the quartz. "When did you do this?" My mother froze for a split second while stirring the gravy. "Oh, that," she said, not turning around. That was months ago. The old counter cracked. A neighbor, Jim. He had some leftover slab from his own renovation. He gave it to us for next to nothing. And your father installed it. And the machine I asked, nodding at the espresso maker. That brand cost at least $800. I knew because I had looked at it for my own apartment and decided I couldn't afford it. Secondhand, she chirped. Marketplace. Practically a steal. I nodded. It made sense. Dad was handy. They were thrifty. We went out to dinner that night at the Oak Room, the nicest steakhouse in town. My father insisted. My treat, he said, to celebrate having our girl home. I knew, logically, that his treat was money I had sent them 2 weeks ago for insurance premiums, but I didn't say anything. I ordered the chicken. The restaurant was busy. As we were leaving, a man in a golf shirt walked by our table. He looked about my father's age, tanned and fit. Gordy the man shouted, clapping my father on the shoulder. Good to see you. We still on for the trip next month? The guys are pumped. My father stiffened. He laughed, a loud, booming laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes. Oh, you know me. Bill. Always dreaming, we will see. We will see. This is my daughter, Madeline. From Boston. The man turned to me, beaming. Oh, the famous Madeline. Your dad talks about you all the time. Nice to meet you. He turned back to my father. Seriously. Though, check your email. The deposit deadline is Tuesday. He walked away. I looked at my father. What trip, I asked. My father waved his hand dismissively. Oh, just some talk with the boys. A fishing trip. I am not going. It is too expensive. Bill just likes to plan things. He put his arm around me. Come on, let's get you home. You look exhausted. I was exhausted. I was so tired that my brain refused to connect the dots. The deposit deadline on Tuesday, the insurance premium I had sent, the quartz countertops, the tan. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Because if I didn't believe him, then the last 8 years of my life, the scrimping, the saving, the lonely nights in my apartment were all for nothing. So I got in the car. I went back to their house. I slept in my childhood bedroom. The next morning, I drove back to Harbor City. 2 days later, on Tuesday, my father called. Maddie, I hate to ask, he said, his voice low, but the property tax assessment came in again. They made a mistake on the first one. We need another $1,200, just to be safe. I stared at the spreadsheet on my screen. I stared at the line where I had entered property tax in December. I thought about the man in the restaurant, the deposit deadline. I hesitated. Dad, I said, I thought the taxes were paid in December. There was a silence on the line, a sharp, distinct silence. Are you questioning me? Madeline, he asked. His voice wasn't warm anymore. It was hurt, deeply, performatively hurt, after everything we have done. We are struggling here. Honey, we are trying to hold on to your childhood home, and you are worried about... What accounting guilt washed over me like a rogue wave. I was being petty. I was being cold. They were my parents. I am sorry. Dad, I said, I will send it. I sent the $1,200. I updated the spreadsheet. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, watching the lights of the city blink on, one by one. I felt safe. I had done the right thing. I had protected them. I didn't know yet that I wasn't the protector. I was the mark. The revelation was coming, but it wouldn't come with a bang. It would come with a whisper, a slip of the tongue, and the quiet, devastating sound of laughter through a phone line. But for now, I was still Madeline Brooks, the good daughter, the responsible one, the angel with the open checkbook. I went to sleep, and I dreamed of numbers, rows and rows of them, marching off a cliff, falling into a bottomless black ocean, and at the bottom of the ocean. My parents were waiting, smiling, with their hands held out. The compliance seminar was mandatory, held in the glass-walled conference room on the 44th floor. I sat in the back row, nursing a lukewarm coffee, while a man from the legal department clicked through a slide deck titled, Identifying Financial Abuse and Structuring. He was talking about red flags. He spoke about rapid movement of funds, changing beneficiary names, and the psychological manipulation of vulnerable parties. He used words like emotional coercion and urgency and isolation. Usually, I tuned these sessions out. They were for the junior analysts, the ones who didn't yet know how to spot a shell company in a stack of ledgers. But that Tuesday, his voice seemed to drill specifically into the center of my chest. Victims are often convinced that they are the only ones who can solve the crisis. He said, pacing in front of a projection of a fractured shield, the perpetrator creates a perpetual state of emergency. The victim pays to buy peace. But peace is never the product. Control is the product. I felt a cold sweat prickle along my hairline. I set my coffee down. The room felt suddenly airless. I went back to my desk and did something I had never done in 8 years. I didn't open the spreadsheet I made for myself, the one that tracked the totals. I opened my actual bank statements. I went back 5 years. I started looking at the recipients. In the beginning, the transfers went to a joint checking account at Silver Pine Community Bank. The name on the transfer was simple, Gordon and Elaine Brooks. Then, 3 years ago, it changed. The recipient became Brooks' household. 2 years ago, it shifted again to a routing number attached to something called SP, Family Management. 6 months ago, it had changed to a generic account simply labeled HRC Admin. I had never questioned it. Every time the account changed, my mother would offer a breathless, frantic explanation about the bank fees being too high, or a teller being rude, or a hacking scare that forced them to close the old account. I had nodded, updated my autopay, and felt proud of my adaptability. Now, staring at the screen, the risk analyst in me woke up. In my professional life, if a client changed their routing information 4 times in 5 years, I would have flagged them for immediate audit. I would have suspected layering the process of moving money to distance it from its source. But this wasn't a client. It was my mother who knit blankets for the church bazaar. It was my father who taught me how to fish. I closed the browser window. I felt like I was spying on them. I felt dirty. The next day, my mother called. "Maddie, honey, I need you to do something for me," she said. Her voice was tight. "What is it?" I asked. "We need to switch the transfer again. Just for this month. Maybe next month, too. The credit union is being impossible about the hold times on the checks. We opened a new online account. It is faster." My stomach turned over. It was exactly what the man in the seminar had described. "Mom," I said, keeping my voice neutral, "why do you keep changing banks? It makes it hard to track everything." There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath. "Are we being difficult?" she asked. Her voice wobbled, instantly pivoting to the frequency of martyrdom. "We are just trying to manage. Madeline, your father spends hours on the phone with these people. We are just trying to make it easier for you so the money does not get stuck. If it is too much trouble, forget it. We will just let the electric bill go late." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. It was a reflex. "No. Mom," I said quickly, "it is not too much trouble. Send me the details." She sent a text 5 minutes later with a routing number and a new account name, Silver Pine Services. I made the switch. But this time, I took a screenshot of the text. I took a screenshot of the confirmation screen. I saved them in a folder on my desktop labeled Miscellaneous. Buried inside 3 other folders. I didn't know why I was doing it. I told myself I was just being organized. 2 weeks later, a nor'easter slammed into the East Coast. Harbor City was buried under 2 feet of snow, and the wind howled against the glass of my apartment building. My phone rang at 9 in the evening. It was my mother. "Maddie, the power is out," she said. "The lines are down. But the generator is running. The problem is the internet. We have no internet, and your father needs to check his email for a quote. We cannot get through to the cable company. The lines are jammed." "Okay," I said. "What do you want me to do?" "Can you call the priority line?" she asked. "Since you are in the city, maybe you can get through. I will give you the account number." Just tell them to reset the gateway from their end. She rattled off a string of numbers. I called the provider. I waited on hold for 40 minutes, watching the snow swirl outside my window. Finally, a representative answered. "Service department. This is Kevin," the voice said. "Hi, Kevin," I said. "I am calling for my parents. The service is down. I have the account number." I gave him the number. "Okay, I see the account here." Kevin said, "For security, can you verify the account holder's name and the authorized passcode?" "Sure." I said, "It is Gordon Brooks, or Elaine Brooks." There was a pause, the clicking of a keyboard. "I am sorry, ma'am." Kevin said, "That name does not match the account number you provided." I frowned. "Are you sure it is 14 Maple Drive, Silver Pine, Ohio? I have the address," he said. "But the name is not Brooks, and I cannot proceed without the correct name and passcode." My heart skipped a beat. Maybe it was under the business name Try Brooks Contracting. I said, "No, ma'am. Try Silver Pine Services." "No, ma'am. Look, I cannot give you the name on the account. That is a privacy violation. If you do not have the info, I have to terminate the call." "Wait," I said. "Just tell me, is the last name Brooks?" "No." He said, "It is not." He hung up. I sat there in the dark of my apartment, the phone cold in my hand. 14 Maple Drive, my parents' house, the house I had been paying the mortgage on for 8 years, the house where I grew up. Who else would have the internet account in their name? I called my mother back. "Mom," I said, "they would not let me in. They said the name on the account is not Brooks." There was a beat of silence, a very long beat. "Oh," she said. Her voice was high. "Airy, that silly boy. It must be under Tyler's name, or maybe the neighbor. Jim. We share a line sometimes to save money. You know how expensive the data is." She laughed, but the laugh was brittle. It sounded like glass breaking under water. "Don't worry about it, Maddie," she said. "The power just came back on. We are fine. Go to sleep." She hung up before I could ask why they would be sharing an internet line with a neighbor, when I sent them $200 specifically for cable and internet every month. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. The doubts were no longer whispers. They were shouting. I decided to call Tyler. My younger brother was 28. He lived in an apartment 10 minutes from our parents. He was the golden boy, the one who stayed close, the one who was always finding himself while I found the money. I called him on a Tuesday afternoon. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, Mads," he said. He sounded cheerful. "Hey, Ty," I said. "I was just checking in. How are Mom and Dad?" "Oh, you know," he said. Same old, same old. Dad is stressing about the truck. Mom is stressing about Dad." I hesitated. "Ty," I asked, "do you pay for the internet at the house?" He laughed. "Me? No way. I can barely pay my own Netflix bill." "Why nothing?" I said. "Just a mix-up with the bill. Hey, how is the job search going?" "It is good," he said. "I have a lead on a landscaping gig. Actually, Mom and Dad said if I get it, we might be able to go down to the beach place for a weekend in August. To celebrate." I froze. "The beach place?" I asked. Tyler went silent. The silence was immediate and total. It was the silence of a child who realizes they have just broken a very expensive vase. I mean, the beach. Trip," he stammered. "Just a day trip. To the public beach. You know, the one with the boardwalk." "Tyler," I said, my voice dropping. "You said the beach place. Do they have a place?" "No," he shouted. He was panicking. "No, Mads, you are hearing things. Mom says don't bring up there is no place. I have to go. My other line is ringing." He hung up. I stared at the phone. My hands were shaking. "Mom says don't bring up the beach place." The sentence looped in my mind. It was a command, a rule, a secret. A few weeks later, I was at an engagement party for Sarah, my colleague. It was at a rooftop bar in downtown Harbor City. The air was crisp, the champagne was expensive, and for the first time in months, I was trying to be present. I was wearing a navy dress I had bought on sale. I had curled my hair. I was holding a glass of sparkling rosé and listening to Sarah talk about floral arrangements. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I ignored it. It buzzed again, and again, 3 times in rapid succession. I excused myself and walked to the edge of the terrace. Away from the laughter and the music, I looked at the screen. It was my father. I answered. "Hello, Maddie." "Listen to me," he said. He wasn't doing the warm voice. He wasn't doing the gentle, apologetic voice. He was yelling. "Dad." "What is wrong?" "They are here." "Maddie," he said, "the sheriff. They are serving a tax lien. They say if I do not pay the back assessment by 5 o'clock today, they are seizing the accounts. They are going to freeze everything." I looked at my watch. It was 4:15. "Dad," I said, "I don't understand. I paid the taxes. I sent you the money in December, and again in February. It wasn't enough." He shouted. "The assessment went up. They added penalties, Maddie. Please, I am begging you. The sheriff is standing right here. If they freeze the accounts, the business is dead. We lose the house. We lose everything." How much, I asked. I felt sick. The champagne in my stomach turned to acid. 18,000, he said. $18,000. I looked back at the party. Sarah was laughing, throwing her head back. Someone was making a toast. "Dad," I whispered, "I don't have $18,000 sitting in my checking account. I would have to pull it from my emergency fund. That is everything I have left." "Do you want us on the street?" he snapped. "Is that it? You want to be right, or you want to have parents?" The cruelty of the question took my breath away. It was a weaponized binary. "I will send it." I said. I hung up. I opened my banking app. My fingers felt like they belonged to someone else. I transferred the money from my savings, the money I had scraped together for a rainy day, for a car, for a life, into the checking account. Then I wired it to Silverpine Services. $18,000. Gone in 10 seconds. I stood on the terrace for 5 minutes, breathing in the cold city air. I composed my face. I put the mask back on. I walked back into the party. "Is everything okay?" Sarah asked, touching my arm. "You look pale." I smiled. It felt like the skin on my face was going to crack. "Everything is fine," I said. "Just a family thing. It is handled." I stayed for another hour. I smiled. I toasted. I ate a crab cake. When I finally got to my car in the parking garage, I sat in the driver's seat and screamed. It wasn't a word. It was just a sound. A raw, guttural noise of frustration and exhaustion. Then I cried. I cried until my chest ached, until the steering wheel was wet with tears. I cried for the $18,000. I cried for the beach place I wasn't allowed to know about. I cried because I was 33 years old, and I felt like a child who couldn't stop trying to please people who would never be satisfied. But the breaking point didn't happen then. It happened 3 days later. It was a Tuesday. I was at home, working remotely. I needed to ask my mother about a discrepancy in the date of the tax lien receipt. I had asked her to send a receipt that still hadn't arrived. I dialed the home phone. The line clicked open. Usually, there was a ringing sound. But sometimes, with the old landlines in Silver Pine, if someone picked up another extension at the exact moment the call connected, you could hear the room before the connection fully established. I didn't hear a hello. I heard laughter. It was a deep, belly laugh. My father's laugh. "Worried she is going to want to see the paperwork." "Gordon," my mother's voice said. She sounded amused. "Light. Let her worry," my father said, chuckling. "What is she going to do?" "Drive down here. She is too busy climbing the corporate ladder." "But 18,000. "Gordon," my mother said, "that is a lot. Do you think she has any idea?" "No," my father said. The word was drawn out. Confident. "She doesn't have a clue. She is our little pension plan. Elaine, best investment we ever made." My mother laughed again. It was the same laugh she used when she watched sitcoms. "God, she is so serious." My mother said, "Mom, I need a receipt." "Mom, send the documentation." She acts like she is the IRS. She will pay, my father said. His voice was lower now, satisfied. She always pays. She needs us to need her. It is pathetic. Really. But hey, it bought the boat. The line went dead. I hadn't hung up. They had realized the phone was off the hook. Or perhaps the connection had just failed. I sat in my ergonomic chair in my silent, expensive, empty apartment. She is our little pension plan. Pathetic. Really, it bought the boat. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The tears I had shed in the parking garage 3 days ago were the last tears I would shed for them. A strange, cold sensation washed over me. It started at the base of my spine and moved up to my neck. It wasn't numbness. It was clarity. For 8 years, I had been operating under the assumption that we were playing the same game. I thought the game was family survival. I thought the rules were love, loyalty, and mutual support. But we weren't playing that game. We were playing a different game. They were the con artists, and I was the mark. They weren't struggling. They were harvesting. I set my phone down on the desk. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked at the city. The chaos of the traffic below didn't look chaotic anymore. It looked manageable. It was just physics, mass and velocity. I could handle physics. I went back to my desk. I opened the spreadsheet. I deleted the column titled Reason Given. It didn't matter what they said. It was all fiction. I created a new tab. I titled it Evidence. I started from the beginning. I logged into my bank account and downloaded 5 years of PDF statements. I went through every single month. 4,000, 4,000, 600, 1,200, 18,000. I cross-referenced the dates with my text messages. I used a software tool to export my entire text history with both of them. I searched for keywords, emergency, help, sick, lien, tax, doctor. I matched every plea to a payment. I built a timeline. It was a masterpiece of forensic accounting. It showed the escalation. It showed the manipulation. It showed the emotional triggers they pulled like levers on a slot machine. Total confirmed transfers, $384,000. That was the number. $384,000. That wasn't support. That was a grand larceny. That was a retirement fund. That was a life. I worked until 4 a.m. When I was done, I had a dossier. But I needed more. I needed physical proof. I needed to see the boat. I needed to see the beach place. I needed to see where my life had gone. I sent a text to the family group chat the next morning. Hey, Mom and Dad, I have some vacation days I need to use or I lose them. Thinking of coming down for a long weekend. Maybe I can help you guys set up a budget for the rest of the year. Make sure we are all on track. The response was immediate. Oh, Maddie, that would be wonderful. My mother texted back, followed by 3 heart emojis. We would love to see you. And yes, your father could definitely use some help with the numbers. You are such a blessing. A blessing. I packed my bag. I didn't pack casual clothes. I packed my portable scanner. I packed a voice recorder. I packed my laptop. I drove to Silver Pine on a Thursday. When I pulled into the driveway, they were waiting on the porch. My father waved. My mother clasped her hands over her heart. It was a perfect tableau of welcoming parents. I got out of the car. Maddie, my father called out. He came down the steps, moving with a spry energy that contradicted the "be back" he had used to justify $3,000 in medical bills last year. He hugged me. I let him. I felt his arms around me, and I felt nothing. No warmth, no comfort, just the pressure of a stranger. We are so glad you are here, he said. I bet you are. I thought. We went inside. The house looked the same, but now I saw it differently. I saw the expensive new throw pillows. I saw the high-end sound bar under the television. I saw the bottle of single malt scotch on the sideboard that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. We had a lovely dinner. I played my part. I asked about the neighbors. I asked about the weather. I didn't ask about the money. Not yet. I'm just so tired. I said around 9 o'clock. Work has been brutal. I think I'm going to turn in. Of course. Honey. My mother said, sleep as long as you want. I went upstairs to my room. I waited until the house was silent. I waited until I heard the heavy, rhythmic snoring from their bedroom down the hall. Then I got up. I crept downstairs. The floorboards creaked. But I knew which ones to avoid. I had grown up here. I knew the house better than they did. I went to the kitchen. I didn't turn on the light. The moonlight from the window was enough. I looked at the counter where the mail piled up. Usually, my mother hid the mail when I visited. She would sweep it into a drawer, but this time, she had been careless. Or maybe she just didn't think I was smart enough to look. There was a stack of envelopes next to the fruit bowl. I flipped through them. Electric bill, junk mail, coupon flyer, and then, near the bottom, a thick envelope from Briarstone Credit Union. It wasn't addressed to Gordon Brooks. It wasn't addressed to Elaine Brooks. It was addressed to the Brooks Family Support Fund. I stared at the name, Support Fund. It wasn't a savings account. It was a formal entity. They had incorporated my generosity. They had turned my guilt into a limited liability company. I carefully lifted the flap of the envelope. It wasn't sealed shut, just tucked in. I pulled out the statement. I scanned the transaction history. Deposit $18,000. Transfer from M. Brooks debit. $4,500. Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. Debit $2,200. Silver Pine Marina slip fee. Fee debit. $1,200. Nordstrom debit $5,000. Cash withdrawal. I looked at the marina charge. Slip fee. It bought the boat. They hadn't just stolen my money. They were living a life of luxury on my back, and they had given it a name that mocked the very reason I gave it to them. Support Fund. I put the statement back in the envelope. I tucked the flap back in exactly as it had been. I placed it back in the stack. Third from the bottom. I stood in the moonlight and took a deep breath. The sadness was gone. The confusion was gone. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I wasn't the angel. I was the risk analyst, and I had just found the root cause of the loss. I went back upstairs, lay down in my bed, and stared at the dark ceiling. I didn't sleep. I formulated a plan. I calculated the variables. Tomorrow, I would go back to Harbor City, and then the audit would begin. They wanted a budget. I would give them a budget. I would give them an accounting so thorough it would strip the paint off the walls. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence of the house. It was the last quiet night the Brooks family would ever have. The office of Northbridge Compliance Group was sterile in a way that I found comforting. It didn't smell like lemon polish or pot roast. It smelled of toner and industrial carpet cleaner. It was a place where facts went to be verified, and where feelings were left in the waiting room. I sat across from Dana Wexler. She was a woman who looked like she had been carved out of flint-sharp angles, gray eyes, and a stillness that was unnerving until you realized she was just listening very, very closely. I had placed my dossier on her desk. The spreadsheet, the timeline, the photo I had taken of the envelope addressed to the Brooks Family Support Fund. Dana didn't flip through it casually. She read every line. She traced the columns of numbers with a manicured finger, pausing at the totals. When she finally looked up, her expression hadn't changed, but the air in the room felt heavier. "So," Dana said, her voice dry, "you are not here for a lawsuit. Not yet. You are here for an autopsy." I clasped my hands in my lap to stop them from shaking. "I need to know what is true," I said. "I spent 8 years believing I was keeping them off the street. I need to know if any of it was real, or if I was just a mark." Dana leaned back in her chair. "Here is the hard reality, Madeline," she said. "If you sent them money voluntarily, even under a sob story, the law often views that as a gift. Being a bad parent is not a crime. Guilt-tripping your daughter is not a felony. If they asked for help and you gave it, that money is likely gone." I nodded. I had expected that. "However," she continued, her eyes narrowing slightly, "if they created a structured enterprise to solicit funds based on demonstrable lies, fraudulent documents, fake liens, invented medical emergencies that moves us into theft by deception, and if they used your identity to facilitate it, that is a different animal entirely." She tapped the photo of the envelope. "This she said. Brooks Family Support Fund, and the other entity you noticed on the transfers. Silver Pine Family Services. These sound like charities. But I ran a preliminary check before you walked in. She turned her monitor so I could see it. Silver Pine Family Services is a limited liability company registered to Gordon Brooks. The stated purpose is consulting, but look at the merchant category codes associated with its primary account. I leaned in. I saw a list of codes. Travel, dining, home improvement, and this one, Dana said, pointing to a recurring charge. VRBO, vacation rentals, I whispered. Your Family Services, LLC, is paying a monthly retainer to a property management group in the Outer Banks, Dana said, and look here, a deposit for the Seahorse Estate. I felt the blood drain from my face. The beach place, the one Tyler had panicked about, the one my mother said didn't exist. They incorporated, I said, my voice sounding hollow in the quiet office. They didn't just spend the money, they laundered it through a business to make it look legitimate to whom? To themselves. To the tax man. Mostly. Dana said, if they are claiming these as business expenses, they are defrauding the IRS too. But there is something else. She clicked to another tab. You mentioned some transfers went to an account called HRC Admin. Yes, I said. My mother said it was the administrator for her back specialist. Hawthorne Rehabilitation Center, or something like that. Dana shook her head. It stands for Hawthorne Ridge Circle. She said, it is an investment club, unregistered. It looks like a localized Ponzi scheme, or a high-risk speculative pool run by a man named William Bill Sterling. Bill, I said, the man at the steakhouse. The one who asked about the deposit. Dana nodded. Your father is not just spending your money on renovations. He is gambling with it. He is feeding it into a high-risk pool to try and hit big returns. That $18,000 you sent for the tax lien. She pulled up a timeline graph. 2 days after you wired that $18,000, a transfer of $16,000 moved from Silver Pine Services to Hawthorne Ridge Circle. He didn't pay a lien. Madeline, he covered a margin call. I sat back, the leather of the chair creaking. He took my emergency fund, I said softly. He took the money I saved for my own life, and he used it to cover a bad bet. Dana looked at me with a softness that surprised me. Madeline, she said, you need to stop thinking of them as your parents. You need to think of them as counterparties. They are operating a business. You are the primary investor. The question is, do you want to liquidate? I looked at the screen. I looked at the lies laid out in clean, digital fonts. I want to audit them. I said, I want to see the receipts. Then we need to provoke them. Dana said, we need them to commit to a lie in writing. We need them to send you a document that is demonstrably forged. That is the leverage point. I left the office with a headache that throbbed behind my eyes. But the fog of confusion was gone. I had a mission now. That evening, I sat in my apartment and dialed my parents. I put the phone on speaker and opened my recording app. I took a deep breath. I channeled the voice of the Madeline they knew, the soft, pliable, helpful daughter. Hey, Mom, I said when she answered. Maddie. You made it back safe. We missed you already, she chirped. I am safe, I said. Listen, I was looking at my finances for the year. My accountant says I might be able to claim some of the help I gave you guys as a deduction if we structure it right, like a gift tax exclusion or medical support. Oh, she said. Her tone shifted instantly. It became cautious, like a fox hearing a twig snap. Yeah, I said, but I need some documentation. Just simple stuff. The receipt for the tax lien payment from last month, and maybe the invoices for your back therapy. If I can show those to my accountant, I might get a refund. There was a silence. Then my father's voice came on the line. He must have been listening on the extension. Maddie, why do you need to bring the government into this? He asked. His voice was rough, irritated. It is family business. You don't want them poking around our accounts. I am not bringing them into your accounts. Dad, I said, keeping my voice sweet. Just mine. I just need the receipt. You paid the lien. Right, so there must be a receipt from the county. Of course I paid it, he snapped. You think I pocketed it? Is that what you think? I am not saying that. I said, I am just saying, for my taxes, I need the paper. We don't keep every scrap of paper. Madeline, my mother interjected. She sounded shrill. We were in a crisis. We were trying to save the house, and now you are harassing us for receipts, like we are employees. I am not harassing you. Mom, I am just asking for one piece of paper for an $18,000 payment. We will look for it, my father shouted. But don't hold your breath. I probably threw it out. God. Madeline, ever since you got that promotion, you have become so transactional. It is ugly. He disconnected. I stared at the phone. Transactional. They had taken $384,000 from me, and I was the transactional one. The anger I expected didn't come. Instead, a cold satisfaction settled in my chest. They didn't have the receipt because the payment never happened. They were cornered. Later that night, my phone buzzed. It wasn't my parents. It was Tyler. The text was short. Can I call you? Mom and Dad are asleep. I called him immediately. Ty. I asked. I heard him exhale. He sounded like he was outside. I could hear the wind in the trees. Maybe the crickets. Mads, he said. They are really mad. Dad is pacing around the kitchen drinking scotch. He says you are turning on them. I am not turning on them. Ty. I said, I just asked for a receipt. Why is that such a threat? Tyler was silent for a long time. Mads, he said, his voice trembling. Do you remember when you left for college? Yeah. I said, do you remember what they told me? I was 10. I was crying because you were leaving. No. I said, what did they tell you? They told me. They told me you wanted to leave. They said you thought you were too good for us. They said you were abandoning the family to go be with rich people. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. That wasn't true. I had cried every night for the first month of college because I missed them so much. They said the money you sent, was guilt money. Tyler whispered, they told me you were paying to make up for leaving. That is why they take it. Mads, they think they are owed it. Because you left. I closed my eyes. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. They hadn't just used my money. They had used my departure to poison my brother against me. They had framed my success as a betrayal and my generosity as penance. And you believed them? I asked, my voice cracking. I didn't want to. He said, but they are Mom and Dad, and you were gone, and every time you sent money, they would say, see, she knows she did wrong. She is trying to buy her way back in. He started to cry. I am sorry. Mads, I should have told you. But I was scared. I am still scared. If they cut me off, I don't have a job yet. I don't have anywhere to go. It's okay. Ty, I said. I wiped a tear from my own cheek. It is not your fault. They are good at this. They are professionals. I hung up with Tyler and felt a new sensation. It wasn't just cold clarity anymore. It was determination. They had taken my money, yes, but they had also stolen my narrative. They had stolen the truth of who I was, a loving daughter, and replaced it with a caricature of a guilty defector to keep my brother loyal and the checks coming. I needed to find the origin point, the thread of truth. Dana had said the best lies are wrapped around a kernel of truth. I went back to the spreadsheet. I looked at the very first payments. 8 years ago, mortgage, medical. I opened a new browser window. I went to the county clerk's public records website for Silver Pine. I searched for my parents' property. There was a lien history. 8 years ago, there was a pre-foreclosure notice filed. My father's business had taken a hit. The initial crisis, the one that started this whole cycle, had been real. But then I saw the release. The foreclosure notice was rescinded 6 months later. The mortgage was reinstated. That was 7.5 years ago. For 7.5 years. The crisis had been over, but the payments hadn't stopped. They had realized that the crisis was profitable. They had realized that my fear was a renewable resource. The support had mutated. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about lifestyle maintenance. It was about keeping up appearances in Silver Pine. It was about the quartz countertops and the boat and the investment club. I wasn't saving them from drowning. I was buying them a yacht. I was the predictable income. I was the salary they didn't have to work for. I was about to close my laptop when an email notification popped up. It was from a credit monitoring service I had signed up for after the compliance seminar. Alert new inquiry detected. I clicked it. Inquiry from Briarstone Credit Union. Reason credit limit increase request. I frowned. I didn't bank with Briarstone. I clicked through to the full report. There, sitting in the active accounts section, was a credit card. Briarstone Platinum Rewards. Visa. Opened 3 years ago. Authorized user Madeline Brooks. Mailing address. P.O. Box, 404 Silver Pine, Ohio. My heart hammered against my ribs. I clicked on the balance details. Current balance, $22,000. Status current. They had opened a credit card in my name, my parents'. They had used my social security number, which, of course, they had from when I was a child, and they had forged my signature. They had directed the statements to a P.O. box, so I would never see them. I logged into the Briarstone website. I didn't have the login, so I clicked Forgot Password. I entered my social security number and my date of birth. It asked for a verification method. Send code to email elaine.brooksgmail.com. I stared at the screen. I selected Try Another Way. Answer security question. What is the name of your first pet? I typed Buster, the golden retriever we had when I was 7. Access granted. I was in. I scrolled through the transaction history. It was a diary of indulgence. Royal Caribbean Cruise, $4,500. Omni Hotels, $800. Silver Pine Country Club, annual dues. Liquor Barn, $300. And the payments. The payments on the card were being made from the Silver Pine Services account, the account I was funding. I was paying off the credit card they had fraudulently opened in my name with the money I was sending them to halve the house. It was a perfect, closed loop of parasitism. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to put my head between my knees. This wasn't just lying. This was criminal identity theft. This was my mother and father looking at me not as a person, but as a resource to be mined until it was empty. I wanted to call them. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive to Silver Pine and burn the house down, but I stopped. I remembered Dana's voice. We need them to commit to a lie in writing. If I confronted them now, they would claim it was a mistake. They would claim I authorized it verbally. They would gaslight me until I doubted my own memory. I needed to be smarter. I picked up the phone and called the credit bureau. It was automated at this hour. To place a freeze on your credit file. Press 1? I pressed 1. Your credit file is now frozen. Then I went to the Briarstone portal. I didn't close the account. I didn't report it as fraud yet. I simply disputed the most recent transaction, a $500 charge at a jewelry store, as unrecognized. I wanted to see what they would do when the card stopped working. I wanted them to panic. For the next 2 days, I went to work, I sat in meetings, I analyzed risk for shipping conglomerates, I smiled at Sarah, I drank coffee, and I waited. On Thursday morning, my mother texted, "Hey honey, hope work is good. Just a heads up. Another medical bill came in for Dad. It is small. Just $800. Can you shoot it over?" I looked at the text. They were testing the waters. After the receipt conversation, they were trying a smaller amount to see if the tap was still flowing, to see if I was still obedient. I didn't reply immediately. I went to my document. I looked at the $384,000 total. I looked at the $22,000 credit card debt. I looked at the lies about me abandoning the family. I realized I didn't want an apology. An apology was words. I wanted justice. And justice, in this world, was paperwork. I drafted a message. I typed it out, then deleted it. I typed it again. It needed to be simple. It needed to be final. It needed to be the pivot point where the victim became the prosecutor. I didn't send it yet. I saved it in my drafts. I waited for the second text. I knew it would come. When the money didn't arrive instantly, the urgency would ramp up. The medical bill would become an emergency. Sure enough. 2 hours later, Maddie, please, Dad is really stressed. His blood pressure is up. We need to pay this today or the doctor won't see him. It was a lie. Doctors didn't refuse to see patients over an $800 bill instantly. It was a clumsy, desperate lie. I opened my banking app. I looked at the transfer button one last time. Then I closed it. I opened the draft. I looked at the words. They were calm. They were polite. They were devastating. I took a breath. The air in my apartment felt clean. I was ready for part 4. I was ready to watch the house of cards fall. I didn't send the money. I let the silence stretch. I let them sit in Silver Pine, checking their accounts, refreshing their screens, wondering why the machine had stopped working. I imagined my father pacing the kitchen. I imagined my mother staring at her phone. She always pays. They had said, not today. I went to the window and looked out at the city. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the harbor. The lights were coming on. Thousands of them. Each one a life, a story. My story was changing. The genre was shifting. It wasn't a family drama anymore. It was a revenge story. But the best revenge, I realized, wasn't noise. It was silence followed by a subpoena. I walked back to my phone, my thumb hovering over the screen, waiting for the perfect moment to drop the hammer. The silence in my apartment was absolute. It was the kind of silence that precedes a thunderclap. My thumb hovered over the send button. On the screen, the group chat titled, Brooks Family Love, blinked with the latest demand from my mother. Maddie, are you getting these? Dad is really spiraling. Please just wire the 800. We can talk about the rest later. Love you. It was a masterclass in economy guilt, urgency, and a dismissal of my previous boundaries, all wrapped in a sign-off of affection. I didn't feel the familiar tug in my chest. I didn't feel the urge to fix it. I felt the cold, hard surface of the desk under my elbow. I looked at the draft I had written. Perfect, send the receipts. Because my attorney is filing the accounting tomorrow, I pressed send. I set the phone down on the desk and waited. I didn't have to wait long. The reaction was not a text. It was an eruption. My phone lit up with a call from Gordon Brooks. I let it ring. It rang until it went to voicemail, and then immediately rang again. Then a text from Tyler popped up. Mads, what is going on? Dad is screaming at the walls. Then a message from my father in the group chat. Written in all caps. Attorney. Are you out of your mind? We are family. Pick up the phone. Then my mother, pivoting instantly from the love you of 3 minutes ago. Madeline, this is cruel. Your father is sick. How can you threaten us with lawyers after everything we have done for you? I watched the notifications stack up like incoming missiles. It was fascinating. For 8 years, I had been the spectator of their drama, the audience they performed for. Now, I was the director. I had changed the script with one sentence, and they didn't know their lines anymore. Gordon was angry because he was losing control. Elaine was crying or typing that she was crying because she was losing her manipulation lever. And Tyler was panicking because the boat he was rocking in was suddenly taking on water. I didn't answer the group chat. I let the word attorney sit there, heavy and radioactive. 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. It was my mother, calling from her personal cell. Not the house line. I picked up. I needed to hear the tone. I needed to confirm the data. Hello? Mom, I said. My voice was steady, startlingly so. Madeline, she breathed. She sounded breathless, fragile, a performance of pulmonary distress. I do not know who is putting these ideas in your head. Is it that friend of yours, that Sarah? You sound like a stranger. I am not a stranger. Mom, I said, I am the person who paid the mortgage for 8 years. I am just asking for the receipts. If the expenses were real, the receipts exist. If they exist, my attorney will have no problem. Attorneys are for enemies. Madeline, she snapped, the frailty vanishing for a split second before she caught herself. We are your parents. We wiped your nose. We paid for your piano lessons. And now you want to audit us? I am feeling faint. My heart is racing. Then you should call a doctor. I said, And make sure you get a receipt for the copay." There was a silence on the line. It was a shocked, vacuum-sealed silence. I had never spoken to her like that. I had never been sarcastic. I had never been hard. "You are cold," she whispered. The venom in her voice was pure, distilled. "You have become a cold, ungrateful woman. I hope your money keeps you warm at night, Madeline, because you are losing the people who actually love you." She hung up. I sat there, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. Cold. She was right. I was cold. But it wasn't the coldness of indifference. It was the temperature of steel that had been forged in a fire I didn't ask for. I went to the Northbridge Compliance Group the next morning. Dana Wexler was waiting for me. Standing next to her was a man I hadn't met. He was tall, with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my first car. "Madeline." Dana said, "This is Mitchell Arden. He is a litigation specialist with Arden Lowe. I brought him in because your case has graduated." Mitchell shook my hand. His grip was firm, dry. Dana showed me the file. "It is impressive," he said. "Most clients come to us with a hunch. You brought us a conviction." We sat around a glass table. Dana opened a binder. It was thick. "We have categorized the transfers into 3 tiers. Dana explained. "Tier 1 is gifted under false pretenses. This is the money you sent for bills that didn't exist. The mortgage payments when the mortgage was current. The medical bills for phantom procedures." She flipped a tab. "Tier 2 is misappropriation. This is the money routed to the investment club and the vacation rentals. This pierces the corporate veil of their LLC. It proves they were not using the funds for support, but for speculation and leisure." She flipped to the back of the binder. "And Tier 3, Mitchell said, leaning forward. "Tier 3 is the nuclear option. Identity theft and fraud. The credit card." He slid a paper across the table. It was an affidavit from Briarstone Credit Union, confirming the account was opened online using an IP address registered to the Internet service at 14 Maple Drive. "Silver Pine. We have them on the IP, Madeline," Mitchell said. "We have them on the signature match or lack thereof. If we take this to a prosecutor, your parents are looking at felony charges, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy." I looked at the documents. I saw my parents' names next to words like felony and conspiracy. I felt a wave of nausea. "I don't want them in prison," I said quietly. Mitchell nodded. "I understand. Most children don't, even when the parents deserve it. I want the truth." I said, "I want them to admit it. I want them to sign a document acknowledging what they did. And I want as much of the money back as possible without destroying them completely. I want to walk away knowing I wasn't crazy. Then we try mediation." Mitchell said, "We go to them. We lay the cards on the table. We give them a choice settle and restitute. Or we file the civil suit and refer the fraud to the district attorney." "When do we go?" I asked. "Tomorrow." Mitchell said, "I have already booked a conference room at the Courtyard Marriott in Silver Pine. I have served them with a notice to appear." "They won't come." I said. "They will," Dana said, "because I sent a copy of the credit card affidavit with the notice. They know we know." The drive to Silver Pine the next day was surreal. I wasn't driving my Honda. I was in the back of a town car with Dana and Mitchell. The landscape rolled by the familiar exit signs, the strip malls, the trees getting denser. We pulled into the parking lot of the hotel. It was a neutral ground, beige walls, patterned carpet, the smell of stale coffee. We walked into the conference room at 10 o'clock sharp. My parents were already there. They were sitting on one side of the long mahogany table. My father was wearing a suit I recognized from church navy blue, slightly tight at the shoulders. My mother was wearing a high-collared blouse and a cardigan, clutching a tissue. They looked small. That was my first thought. Without the backdrop of the house, without the stage of the kitchen table, they looked like 2 aging people caught in a spotlight they hadn't ordered. Tyler wasn't there. He hadn't been invited. This was between the shareholders. Mitchell Arden took the seat at the head of the table. Dana and I sat opposite my parents, Mr. and Mrs. Brooks. Mitchell began. "Thank you for coming." My father didn't look at him. He looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed, burning with a mixture of fear and fury. "You brought lawyers." "Maddie," he said. His voice was a low rumble. "To talk to your father, I brought my advisory team." I said. I kept my hands folded on the table. I couldn't shake his hand. I couldn't hug him. If I touched him, I might shatter. "This is ridiculous," my mother hissed. She dabbed at her eyes. "We are a family. Families help each other. We do not drag each other into hotels to interrogate each other." "Mrs. Brooks," Mitchell said, his voice calm but authoritative. "We are here to discuss a series of financial transactions totaling $384,000 over 8 years, as well as the unauthorized opening of a credit line in your daughter's name." My father slammed his hand on the table. "Unauthorized," he shouted. "Everything she sent was voluntary. She offered it. Dad, do you need help?" "Yes, Maddie, we do. That is not fraud. That is family tradition. That is what you do when you raise a successful child." Mitchell opened the binder. "Mr. Brooks," Mitchell said, "you solicited funds for a tax lien in March that had already been discharged. You solicited funds for medical procedures that never occurred. You routed those funds into high-risk investment vehicles and vacation rentals. That is not tradition. That is deception." My father's face turned a mottled purple. "She owed us," he yelled. He stood up, leaning over the table. "Do you know what we sacrificed for her? We gave her everything. We put her through school. We co-signed her first apartment. We supported her when she was a nobody. This money, it is a return on investment. She is our daughter. Her success is our success. She owes us a pension." Dana looked up from her notes. She didn't blink. "Mr. Brooks," she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a scalpel, "you just contradicted yourself. A moment ago, you said it was a voluntary gift. Now you are saying it is a debt she owed. Which is it? Because legally, you cannot have it both ways. If it is a debt, there must be a contract. If it is a gift, there must be no coercion. You just admitted to viewing her as an investment vehicle." My father froze. He realized he had walked into a trap. He sat down slowly. He smoothed his tie. He looked at my mother. She was staring at the table, twisting the tissue in her hands. It was an understanding. My father muttered, "An understanding." Mitchell repeated. Then my father reached into his briefcase. He pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Actually," he said, a strange, triumphant smirk touching his lips. It was more than an understanding. He slid the paper across the table. I looked at it. It was a document titled Family Repayment Agreement. It was dated 9 years ago. The text was simple, written in a font that looked like Times New Roman. It stated that Madeline Brooks agreed to remit 20% of her future earnings to Gordon and Elaine Brooks in exchange for educational and developmental support, provided during her minority. And at the bottom, there was a signature, Madeline Brooks. I stared at the signature. It was my signature, the loop of the M, the sharp K at the end. But I had never signed this. I had never seen this document in my life. Gordon leaned back, crossing his arms. She signed it right after graduation. He said, "We didn't want to make a big deal of it. We put it in the file. But since you want to get legal, there it is." She agreed to it. Mitchell picked up the paper. He held it up to the light. Then he looked at me. "Madeline," he asked. I looked closer at the signature. I recognized it, not the handwriting, but the specific artifacting. There was a tiny jagged edge on the bottom of the B. I knew where that jagged edge came from. It was from the scan of my FAFSA form when I was 19. The scanner in the college library had a scratch on the glass. Every document I scanned that semester had that tiny jagged line in the same spot. They had lifted it. They had photoshopped my signature from a financial aid document onto a fake contract. "It is a forgery," I said. My voice was quiet. "Excuse me," my father said. "Don't you call me a liar." "It is a digital lift," I said, looking him in the eye. "That signature is from my sophomore year financial aid application." The scanner glass was scratched. "You can see the artifact." I pointed to the line. You kept my old paperwork, I said, and you cut and pasted my name onto a lie. The room went silent. The air conditioning hummed. My father's smirk vanished. He looked at the paper, then at me. He didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed that I had noticed. So what, he snapped. The sentiment was real. You agreed to help us? Mitchell placed the document in a plastic evidence bag. Mr. Brooks, he said, you just presented a forged document in a legal mediation proceeding. This is no longer just a civil dispute. You have just committed attempted fraud in front of 3 witnesses, one of whom is an officer of the court. My mother let out a sob. It was a real sob this time. Gordon, stop it, she wailed. Just stop it. She looked at me. Her eyes were pleading. Maddie, please, he didn't mean it. We are just so scared. We don't have the money. It is gone. The investment club. Bill Sterling. He stopped answering the phone. The money is stuck. We were just trying to bridge the gap until it came back. The investment club. The Ponzi scheme. It had collapsed. Just as Dana predicted. They were squeezing me not to get rich, but to cover the losses of their gambling. At that moment, the door to the conference room opened. We all turned. It was Tyler. He looked terrified. He was wearing jeans and a hoodie, looking like he had slept in his car. Tyler, my mother said, what are you doing here? Tyler walked into the room. He didn't look at our parents. He looked at me. I have something, he said. He walked over to the table. He was shaking. He pulled a photograph out of his pocket. It was printed on glossy paper, like he had just come from a drugstore kiosk. I took the photo. It was a picture of a whiteboard. It looked like it was hanging in my father's home office, the room I wasn't allowed to enter because it was sensitive business, at the top of the whiteboard. Written in blue marker were the words, Maddie Monthly. Underneath were columns, target, actual, delta. But it was the notes in the margins that stopped my heart. Written in my father's distinct, blocky handwriting, Project Sob Story Success. The golden goose lays again. Maybe we can get a facelift next month. LOL. She bought the excuse about the bad back hook, line, and sinker. I stared at the photo. It wasn't just greed. It was mockery. They hadn't just taken the money. They had laughed about it. They had turned my concern, my anxiety, my sleepless nights wondering if they were okay, into a scoreboard. Project Sob Story. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a sharp, twisting agony that had nothing to do with money. I looked up at my father. He saw the photo. His face went gray. Where did you get that? He whispered to Tyler. Tyler didn't answer. He just stood next to me. Looking at his shoes, I looked at the whiteboard photo again. The golden goose. I realized then why I had paid. I hadn't paid because I believed them. Deep down, I think I always knew the numbers didn't add up. I paid because I wanted to be the good daughter. I paid because every time I wired the money, I bought a month of their approval. I bought a month of being our angel. I bought a month of belonging to a family that otherwise seemed to have no use for me. I wasn't paying for their stability. I was paying for my own place at the table. And they knew it. They knew the price of my insecurity. And they had set the market rate accordingly. I felt a hot tear slide down my cheek. I wiped it away angrily. I looked at my father. You wrote this? I asked, holding up the photo. He didn't answer. He looked at the wall. You laughed at me, I said. My voice was rising. I was eating ramen noodles. I was skipping vacations. I was freezing in my apartment because I didn't want to turn up the heat so I could send you money. And you were writing jokes about it on a whiteboard. It was a way to blow off steam, my father shouted. You don't understand the pressure of what I screamed. The pressure of spending my money. My mother stood up. Her face was hard now. The tears were gone. Stop it. Madeline, she said. Her voice was low. Dangerous. She looked at Mitchell, then at Dana, then fixed her eyes on me. You want to play this game, she said. You want to ruin us, fine. But if you do this, if you file these papers, I will tell everyone what I asked. I will tell them what kind of daughter you really are. She said, I will tell the church. I will tell the neighbors. I will tell your little friends in the city. I will tell them you abandoned us. I will tell them you are mentally unstable. I will tell them you attacked your elderly parents because you are greedy and hateful." She leaned in. "You know how this town is, Maddie. You know who they will believe. We have been here for 40 years. You are just the girl who left." I stared at her. It was the ultimate threat. In Silver Pine, reputation was currency. The only thing more important than money was being seen as good people. She was threatening to destroy the only thing I had left in this town, my name. Mitchell started to speak. "Mrs. Brooks, threatening a litigant with defamation is— let her speak," I said. I held up a hand. I looked at my mother. I really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the threat. She wasn't powerful. She was terrified. She was terrified that the neighbors would find out the truth. She was terrified that the good people mask would slip. "You think I care about what the neighbors think?" I asked softly. My mother faltered. "Of course you do. You always cared. You always wanted everyone to like you. That is your weakness. Madeline, you need to be liked." She was right. It had been my weakness. It was the weakness they had exploited for 8 years. But staring at the photo of the whiteboard, staring at the forged contract, staring at the people who had birthed me and then consumed me, I felt that weakness burn away. I don't need to be liked anymore. "Mom," I said. I turned to Mitchell. "File the papers," I said. My father's jaw dropped. "Maddie, no," he said. "You can't. File the civil suit," I said to Mitchell. "And refer the identity theft to the district attorney." I stood up. "I am done paying for a seat at this table," I said. I walked to the door. Tyler was standing there. He looked at me, his eyes wide. "Are you coming?" I asked him. He looked at our parents, then he looked at me. He took a step toward me. "I am sorry, Mom," he whispered. And he walked out the door with me, behind us. I heard my mother start to scream. It wasn't a scream of grief. It was a scream of rage. It was the sound of a predator realizing the cage door had locked from the outside. We walked into the hallway of the hotel. Dana and Mitchell followed us. That went about as expected, Dana said dryly. I looked at Tyler. He was crying silently. I handed him a tissue from my purse. "You did good, Ty," I said. He shook his head. "I should have done it years ago." We walked out into the sunlight of the parking lot. The air was cold, sharp. It felt different than the air in the conference room. It felt real. I had lost my parents. I knew that. There was no coming back from this. The bridge wasn't just burned, it was nuked. But as I stood there, watching the wind move the trees, I realized something else. I hadn't lost a family. I had escaped a cult of 2, where I was the only disciple and the only sacrifice. I looked at Mitchell. "How long until the subpoenas go out?" I asked. "They go out this afternoon," he said. "Good," I said. I looked back at the hotel window. I imagined them in there, panic setting in, the reality of the paper trail closing around them. The filing of Brooks versus Brooks et al. Did not feel like a victory. It felt like dropping a stone into a deep, dark well and waiting to hear it hit the bottom. The splash, when it finally came, was not water, it was paper. Mitchell Arden filed the complaint on a Tuesday. By Thursday, the subpoenas were flying out of his office like guided missiles. We blanketed them. We subpoenaed the bank records of Silver Pine Family Services. We subpoenaed the transaction history of the Hawthorne Ridge Circle. We subpoenaed the employment records of Gordon Brooks at the Silver Pine Municipal Credit Cooperative. I sat in my office in Harbor City, watching the fog roll past the window, and I waited for the noise. It started with the silence of the accounts. The emails from my mother stopped. The group chat went dormant. The notifications that had plagued my life for 8 years, the pings of guilt, the vibrations of urgent need ceased. It was a vacuum, and in that vacuum, the truth began to assemble itself. 2 weeks into the discovery process, Dana Wexler called me. "You need to come in," she said. Her voice was flat, the the voice of a coroner who had found something unexpected during the autopsy. I went to the Northbridge office. The table was covered in printouts. We got the transaction logs for Silver Pine Family Services, Dana said. We traced the deposits. I sat down. I braced myself to see my own name repeated over and over. A monument to my own gullibility. You are the primary depositor, Dana said, sliding a highlighter-marked ledger across the glass. You account for about 70% of the inflow. But look at the other 30%. I looked. Deposit $500. Sarah Miller. Deposit $250. Michael Brooks. Deposit $1,000. James Henderson. I looked up at Dana. Aunt Sarah, I asked. My cousin Michael and Mr. Henderson. The neighbor Dana nodded. It wasn't just you, Madeline, she said. Your parents were running a localized soliciting operation. They told your aunt they needed money for a new water heater. They told your cousin they needed help with legal fees. They told the neighbor it was for a community beautification project that never happened. I felt a cold shock. I had thought I was special. I had thought I was the angel, the pension plan, the one they relied on because I was the successful daughter. I wasn't special. I was just the whale. I was the biggest fish in a barrel they were shooting into. They diversified. I whispered. It gets worse, Dana said. She opened the second file, the Hawthorne Ridge Circle. I looked at the chaos of numbers. We subpoenaed the bank records for the investment club. Dana said, it was run by William Sterling, your father's friend. It wasn't a registered fund. It was a slush fund. She pointed to a series of transfers. Your father was a member, but he was also a recruiter. She said, he brought people in, and when the investments went south, which they did, almost immediately, into high-risk crypto futures and penny stocks, the fund ran dry. She traced a line from my deposits to the fund. See this? On the 15th of November, you sent $4,000 for medical bills. On the 16th, $4,000 moved from your parents' LLC to Hawthorne Ridge Circle. On the 17th, Hawthorne Ridge Circle paid out $4,000 to a man named Robert Gentry. Who is Robert Gentry, I asked. Another investor. Dana said, an early one. He was demanding his money back. Your father used your money to pay off an angry investor to keep the scheme from collapsing. I felt sick. They weren't just stealing from me to buy boats. I said, they were using me to plug holes in a fraud. If this collapses, Dana said quietly, your father isn't just looking at a civil suit from you. He is looking at state charges for securities fraud. He was using you to launder his liability. I went home that night and sat in the dark. I tried to process the scale of it. It wasn't just a family tragedy. It was a crime scene. My parents were not just desperate. They were predatory. They had looked at their daughter, their sister-in-law, their nephew, and their neighbors, and saw nothing but liquidity. Then, the strategy shifted. My phone buzzed. It wasn't a demand for money. It was a photo. I opened it. It was a grainy scan of an old Polaroid. It was me, age 5, sitting on my father's shoulders. We were at the county fair. I was holding a cloud of cotton candy, and he was looking up at me with an expression of pure, unadulterated adoration. The caption read, "Found this in the attic today. Remember how happy you were. We love you. Maddie, we miss our girl." I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered. It was a precision strike. They knew facts wouldn't work anymore. They knew anger wouldn't work. So they deployed the weapon they knew I had no defense against: nostalgia. They were trying to remind me of the version of the story where we were good. The version where they were the protectors and I was the child. Another message came through. A voice note from my mother. I pressed play. Maddie, honey. Her voice was soft, trembling. It sounded like the mother who used to sing me to sleep. I know you are angry. I know we made mistakes with the money. But please, don't let the lawyers destroy us. We are old people. We are your family. Does 8 years of confusion erase 30 years of love? Please, baby, call me. I felt the pull. It was physical. A hook in my gut dragging me back toward them. 30 years of love. Was it all a lie? Could I really be the person who sued her own mother? I closed my eyes. I remembered the whiteboard, Maddie Monthly, Project Sob Story. The love in the photo was real. I told myself, the man in the photo loved that little girl, but that man was gone. He had been replaced by a man who wrote jokes about my gullibility on a whiteboard. I didn't reply. I moved the photo to a folder labeled Evidence, Manipulation Attempts. I chose distance. It felt like amputating a limb, but I knew if I didn't cut it off, the infection would kill me. 2 days later, Tyler was deposed. I wasn't allowed in the room, but Mitchell told me about it afterward. We met in a coffee shop near the courthouse. Mitchell looked tired. How did he do? I asked. He was a mess. Mitchell said he cried 3 times, but he was honest. Mitchell opened his notebook. We asked him about the narratives your parents spun. Mitchell said he admitted that everything he knew about your abandonment came from them. He admitted that they coached him on what to say to you. When you asked about the internet bill, he admitted your mother told him to lie and say it was his account. Did he know about the money? I asked. The amounts. Mitchell shook his head. No. When we showed him the total $384,000, he threw up. Literally. He had to run to the restroom. He had no idea. He thought you were sending maybe a few hundred a month. He told the Record. I thought she was just helping with groceries. I didn't know she was funding the whole show. I looked out the window. Poor Tyler. He hadn't been a conspirator. He had been a prop. He is not a hero. Madeline, Mitchell said gently. He didn't stand up for you when it mattered. But today, under oath, he didn't lie. In a family like yours, that is a revolution. The revolution had consequences. The subpoenas hit the Silver Pine Municipal Credit Cooperative on a Friday. By Monday morning, Gordon Brooks was placed on administrative leave pending an internal investigation in a small town like Silver Pine. You cannot suspend a loan officer without the whole town knowing by lunch. The rumors started, but they weren't the rumors I expected. I got a call from an old high school friend, Jenna. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but she reached out on Facebook. Hey, Maddie, I know it's been forever, she wrote, but I heard something weird at the grocery store today, and I wanted to check on you. Your mom was telling Mrs. Higgins that you're going through a really bad mental health crisis. She said you're having paranoid delusions and that you're attacking them legally because you're off your meds. Is everything okay? I stared at the message. Paranoid delusions. Off your meds. My mother had realized the truth was coming out. The subpoenas were undeniable. The bank records were undeniable. So she had done the only thing she could to protect her standing in the community. She had decided to destroy my credibility before the evidence could destroy hers. If I was crazy, then the lawsuit was just a symptom of my illness. If I was unstable, then the forged documents were just things I imagined. It was an ugly, desperate, brilliant tactic. I typed back to Jenna. I am fine, Jenna. Actually, I am better than I have been in years. My parents are currently under investigation for fraud and identity theft. The court records will be public soon. I can send you the case number if you want to see the truth. I didn't wait for her reply. I screenshotted the message and sent it to Mitchell. Add this to the file. I typed, defamation. I felt a hardening in my chest. It was a sensation I was becoming familiar with. It was like watching concrete set. At first, it was heavy and wet and uncomfortable. But as it dried, it became strong. It became a wall. They were willing to label me insane to save their reputation. That was the final proof. If I needed any, that the relationship was dead. You do not gaslight a community about your child's sanity if you love them. You do that if you view them as a liability to be managed. The smoking gun arrived on a Wednesday. Dana sent me an email with the subject line, VRBO confirmation. I opened the attachment. We got the records from the vacation rental platform. Dana wrote, the subpoenas worked. I looked at the document. It was a reservation confirmation for the Seahorse Estate in the Outer Banks. The cost was $4,500. The payment method was the Briarstone Visa, ending in 4099. The card opened in my name, but it was the user account that mattered. The account was registered to Elaine. Brooks55gmail.com, and the IP address for the booking, it matched the IP address at my parents' house, and the guest list, Gordon Brooks, Elaine Brooks, Tyler Brooks. I wasn't on the list. I was paying for the vacation, but I wasn't invited. We requested a formal response from their attorney regarding this charge. Dana told me on the phone later, and I asked. First, Elaine denied it. Dana said. She claimed she didn't know how her email got on the receipt. She said maybe you used her email to book it as a surprise gift. I laughed. A harsh barking sound. A surprise gift I wasn't invited to. When we pointed out the IP address and the fact that you were in Harbor City working that week, she shifted. Dana continued. She said it was a misunderstanding. She said she thought Gordon had paid for it with his bonus. She said she didn't look at the credit card number. And then I asked, and then she blamed him. Dana said, she told her lawyer. Gordon handles the finances. I just pack the bags. If he used the wrong card, that is his fault. I am just a victim of his bad bookkeeping. I closed my eyes. They were turning on each other. The pressure was cracking the unit. Gordon was the gambler. Elaine was the enabler who enjoyed the winnings. But now that the bill was due, she was rewriting history to make herself a bystander. She threw him under the bus. I said, she did. Dana agreed, and that is good for us. A divided defense is a weak defense. I hung up the phone. I walked to the mirror in my hallway. I looked at my face. I looked older than 33. There were lines around my mouth that hadn't been there a year ago. My eyes looked sharper, less trusting. I worried, for a moment, that I was becoming someone I wouldn't recognize. I worried that this process, the subpoenas, the recordings, the dossiers, was stripping away my humanity. Was I becoming cruel? Was I becoming like them? Then I thought about the text to Jenna. I thought about the whiteboard. I thought about the $384,000. I realized something fundamental. Boundaries always feel like cruelty to the people who benefited from your lack of them. To a parasite, the host taking medicine looks like an act of violence. But it isn't violence. It is survival. I wasn't being cruel. I was simply closing the bank. I was locking the door. I was reclaiming the identity they had stolen and worn like a costume to fool the neighbors. The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. It wasn't a trial yet. It was a preliminary hearing to determine the validity of the civil complaint and to address the forged contract my father had tried to submit. Mitchell called me on Sunday night. Are you ready? He asked. You will have to see them. You might have to testify about the signature. I am ready. I said, it will be emotional. He warned, they will try to make a scene. Your mother will cry. Your father will bluster. Let them. I said, I don't care about the drama anymore. Mitchell, I care about the paper. That was my mantra. Feelings were fluid. Feelings could be manipulated. Feelings could be weaponized with old photos and voice notes. But paper was absolute. A bank transfer was a fact. An IP address was a coordinate. A forged signature was a crime. I spent the night organizing my files. I didn't cry. I didn't drink wine. I printed out the emails. I tabbed the exhibits. Exhibit A, the spreadsheet. Exhibit B, the Maddie Monthly whiteboard. Exhibit C, the Briarstone visa statement. Exhibit D, the mentally unstable text message. I packed my briefcase. It was the same briefcase I used for work. For analyzing risk, I realized that this was the most important risk analysis of my life. I had identified the threat. I had calculated the exposure. And now, I was executing the mitigation strategy. I went to bed and slept deeply, without dreams. When I woke up, the sun was shining on Harbor City. I put on my best suit armor in charcoal gray. I drank my coffee. I drove to the courthouse in Silver Pine, not as a daughter returning home, but as a plaintiff arriving at the scene of the incident. I parked the car. I saw my parents' sedan in the lot. I saw my mother standing by the trunk, adjusting her cardigan, looking anxiously at the entrance. My father was pacing, smoking a cigarette, looking gray and diminished. I didn't feel the urge to run to them. I didn't feel the urge to run away. I grabbed my briefcase. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. One line. I whispered to myself. I replied with one line. That one line had brought us here, and today, I was going to finish the paragraph. I opened the car door and stepped onto the pavement. I walked toward the courthouse steps, the sound of my heels clicking a steady, rhythmic beat on the concrete. Tick, 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 time was up. The courtroom in the Silverpine County Courthouse was smaller than I expected. It smelled of old varnish and floor wax, a scent that reminded me of my elementary school auditorium. It was fitting, I suppose, because I was about to watch my parents perform in a play they had been rehearsing for 30 years. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Mitchell Arden and Dana Wexler. My back was straight. My hands were folded on the table, resting next to a thick binder labeled Exhibit A. Across the aisle, my parents sat with their attorney, a local man named Mr. Henderson who looked like he would rather be anywhere else. My parents, however, looked perfect. My mother, Elaine, was wearing a soft beige cardigan that made her look smaller, frailer. She had a tissue clutched in her hand, dabbing at eyes that were dry but red-rimmed. My father, Gordon, wore his Sunday suit, but he sat with a slump to his shoulders, the posture of a hard-working man beaten down by the world. The hearing began. Mr. Henderson stood up. He didn't have facts, so he had a story. Your Honor, he began, his voice warm and folksy. We are here today because of a tragedy, not a financial tragedy, but a family one. Gordon and Elaine Brooks are good people. They have lived in Silverpine for 40 years. They raised 2 children. They sacrificed everything to send their daughter, the plaintiff, to a prestigious college. He gestured toward me. Madeline became a great success, a high-powered executive in the city, and like many children raised with strong values, she wanted to give back. She wanted to help. The money transferred over these years was not theft. It was not fraud. It was gratitude. It was a daughter remembering where she came from. He paused for effect, but somewhere along the way, she forgot. She got new friends. She got new advisors. And now, she is trying to criminalize the very love she once offered freely. I watched my parents as he spoke. My mother nodded slowly, looking at the floor with a tragic acceptance. My father sighed, shaking his head as if the weight of my betrayal was too heavy to bear. I marveled at it. The performance. It was seamless. If I didn't know the truth, if I hadn't seen the spreadsheet, if I hadn't seen the whiteboard, I would have believed them. I would have looked at the cold woman in the charcoal suit at the plaintiff's table and thought she was a monster. Mitchell didn't stand up to give a speech. He stood up to present a timeline. Your Honor, Mitchell said, his voice crisp, we are not here to discuss feelings. We are here to discuss math. He called Dana to the stand. Dana was the antidote to Mr. Henderson's folksy charm. She was precise. She was clinical. She set up a projector. On the screen, a timeline appeared. It was a jagged red line ascending steeply over 8 years. This chart represents the transfers from Madeline Brooks to her parents. Dana explained. The total is $384,000. Mr. Henderson objected. Your Honor, we have established these were gifts. Dana clicked the remote. A new column appeared next to the transfers. It was titled, Stated Reason versus Actual Expenditure, on March 3rd of last year, Dana said, pointing to the screen. The plaintiff transferred $18,000. The stated reason, documented in text messages, was an urgent tax lien on the primary residence to prevent seizure. She clicked again. Here are the county tax records. There was no lien. The taxes were paid in full 3 months prior. She advanced the slide. Here are the bank records for Silverpine Family Services, the LLC, controlled by the defendants. On March 5th, 2 days after receiving the funds, a transfer of $16,000 was made to Hawthorne Ridge Circle, an unregistered speculative investment pool. The courtroom was silent. The air conditioning hummed. Dana went through them one by one. The medical bills that became boat payments, the furnace repair that became a cruise deposit, the emergency loans that became cash withdrawals at a casino in Atlantic City, Then, she clicked to the next slide. The photo of the whiteboard appeared on the screen. It was blown up, grainy but legible. Maddie Monthly. Project Sob Story. Success. The golden goose lays again, I heard a gasp from the back of the room. It was the court stenographer. Even she couldn't maintain her neutrality in the face of such casual cruelty. My father stiffened in his chair. He didn't look at the screen. He stared straight ahead, his jaw working. Mitchell looked at the judge. Your Honor, this is not the behavior of parents accepting a gift with gratitude. This is the behavior of con artists celebrating a score. They referred to their daughter as a golden goose and a pension plan. They tracked their manipulation like a sales quota. Judge Holloway, a woman with sharp glasses and a sharper gaze, leaned forward. She looked at my father. Mr. Brooks, the judge said, did you write this? My father stood up. He looked trapped. It was a joke. Your Honor, he stammered, it was just blowing off steam. We were under a lot of pressure. What pressure? The judge asked. You had $384,000 of tax-free income flowing into your accounts. Most people in my courtroom would kill for that kind of pressure. My father sat down. He looked small again. But this time, it wasn't a performance. It was shrinkage. Then came the cross-examination of my mother. Mitchell called Elaine to the stand. She walked up slowly, holding the railing. She looked at me as she passed, a look of profound hurt. Mrs. Brooks, Mitchell said gently, you stated in your deposition that you were unaware of the specific financial details, that you left it all to your husband. Is that correct? Yes, she whispered. Gordon handles the money. I just try to keep the house together. I trusted him. Mitchell nodded. He walked to the table and picked up a piece of paper. Exhibit C, Mitchell said. This is a reservation confirmation for a vacation rental in the Outer Banks. The Seahorse Estate. The cost was $4,500. He handed the paper to her. Do you recognize this? My mother looked at it. Her hands were shaking. I remember we went to the beach. She said, Gordon said he had a bonus. Mitchell pointed to the bottom of the page. The email address used to book this reservation is elaine.brooks55@gmail.com. That is your email address, isn't it? Yes, but... And the credit card used... Mitchell continued, his voice hardening slightly. It was a Briarstone Visa ending in 4099. That card is in the name of Madeline Brooks. My mother looked at the paper, then at the judge, then at her husband. I didn't know it was Madeline's card. She said, her voice rising in pitch, Gordon gave me the numbers. He wrote them on a post-it note. He told me to book it because he was busy at work. So you entered the numbers? Mitchell asked. Yes, she cried. Tears began to spill down her cheeks. Real tears. Ugly tears. But I didn't know. I thought it was his card. Why would I steal from my own daughter? I love her. She is my baby. She broke down. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders heaving. I watched her, and I felt a sensation that was more painful than anger. It was pity. She was crying because she was caught. Yes. But she was also crying because the narrative she had built her life around, that she was a good mother, a victim of circumstance, was crumbling under the weight of facts. She wasn't a mastermind. She was a participant. She had chosen comfortable ignorance. She had typed the numbers because she wanted the beach house, and she didn't want to ask where the money came from. Judge Holloway watched her dispassionately. Mrs. Brooks, the judge said, you are admitting that you physically entered the credit card numbers for a card that did not belong to you or your husband. Yes, my mother sobbed. But it was a mistake. Mitchell stepped back. Your Honor, Mitchell said, this card was opened using the defendant's home internet connection. The statements were sent to a P.O. box in Silver Pine. The user on the account is Madeline Brooks, but the authorized user signature is a digital forgery lifted from a college financial aid document. This was not a mistake. This was identity theft. The judge looked at the defense table. Mr. Henderson, the judge said, I want to be very clear. If I find conclusive evidence that your clients knowingly opened this account in the plaintiff's name, I will be referring this matter to the district attorney's office. We are moving beyond civil liability here. We are looking at felony fraud." My mother stopped crying instantly. The threat of prison has a way of drying tears. She looked at Gordon with a look of pure venom. Then, Tyler was called. My brother walked to the stand. He looked 10 years older than he was. He wore a suit that didn't fit him, probably borrowed from a friend. He didn't look at me. He looked at the floor. Mitchell kept it brief. "Mr. Brooks," Mitchell said, "did you receive any financial support from the funds your sister sent to your parents?" Tyler swallowed hard. He leaned into the microphone. "Yes," he said. His voice cracked. "Can you elaborate?" Mitchell asked. "My rent was paid 3 times last year," Tyler said. "And when my transmission blew, Dad paid for it. It was $2,000. And did you know where that money came from?" Tyler closed his eyes. Dad said, "Maddie sent a bonus," he said. "Your sister is taking care of us." "And did you ever question why your sister was paying for your car repairs when she lived 500 miles away?" Tyler shook his head. "No," he whispered. "I didn't want to question it. I needed the money." He looked up then. He looked directly at me. "I am sorry, Maddie," he said. "I didn't ask because I didn't want to know. I let you carry it." It hit me then. The collateral damage. Tyler wasn't evil. He was just weak. He had been trained by the same people I had, but while I had been trained to give, he had been trained to take. We were 2 sides of the same broken coin. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just stated the fact. "I let you carry it." When the testimony concluded, Judge Holloway took off her glasses. She rubbed the bridge of her nose. "I have heard enough for a preliminary ruling," she said. The room went still. "This court finds that there is substantial evidence of financial impropriety, misappropriation of funds, and potential identity theft." She looked at my parents. "I am issuing an immediate freezing order on all accounts associated with Silver Pine Family Services and the personal accounts of Gordon and Elaine Brooks, excluding a singular allowance for basic living expenses, which will be monitored by a court-appointed trustee." My father's face went white. "I am also ordering a full forensic accounting of the past 8 years, to be paid for by the defendants. Based on the findings, we will determine the restitution amount. However," she paused. She looked at me. "Ms. Brooks, the court acknowledges that much of this money was transferred voluntarily, albeit under false pretenses. Recovering the full $384,000 may be legally complex, especially if the funds have been dissipated into bad investments. You may get a judgment for the full amount, but collecting it is a different matter." I nodded. I knew that. You can't get blood from a stone, and you can't get cash from a Ponzi scheme. "But regarding the credit card," the judge continued, her voice turning steel hard again, "that debt is hereby declared the sole responsibility of the defendants, and I am forwarding the transcript of today's hearing regarding the signature forgery to the county prosecutor for review." She banged the gavel. "Court is adjourned." It was over. I didn't feel a rush of triumph. I felt exhausted. I felt light, but it was the lightness of a balloon that had been popped. We walked out of the courtroom. Mitchell shook my hand. "This is a good result." "Madeline," he said, "the freeze order is a stranglehold. They can't move a dime without permission. We will get whatever is left." I nodded. "Thank you." "Mitchell." "Thank you." "Dana." I walked toward the exit. I needed air. As I pushed through the heavy double doors of the courthouse and stepped into the bright, cold afternoon sun, a hand grabbed my arm. I turned. It was my mother. She wasn't the frail old woman from the courtroom anymore. Her face was twisted, her lips pulled back in a snarl. "Are you happy?" she hissed. I pulled my arm away. "I am not happy." "Mom," I said, "I am just finished. You are killing this family," she said. Her voice was a low vibration of hate. "Your father is going to lose his job. We are going to lose the house. We will be on the street." "Is that what you wanted, to see your parents in the gutter?" "You put yourselves in the gutter," I said. "I just turned on the light so you could see where you were standing." She stepped closer. "You will never have a family again," she said. "No one will love you. You are a cold, broken thing. Madeline, You think your money will keep you warm. You will die alone. I looked at her. I saw the fear behind the hate. She was lashing out because she was terrified of the silence that was coming. I would rather be alone than be used. I said, then my father walked out. He stopped beside her. He looked at me. He wasn't angry. He wasn't crying. He was smiling. It was a small, tight smile, almost admiring. I always knew you had it in you, he said. I stared at him. What? He chuckled, lighting a cigarette with a steady hand. The killer instinct, he said. I always knew it was in there somewhere. You got that from me. Maddie, you took us down. You destroyed us. That takes guts. I didn't think you had the stomach for it, but you proved me wrong. I felt a chill run down my spine. He was rewriting the story again. In his mind, he hadn't lost. He had created a formidable opponent. He was claiming credit for my strength. He was twisting my survival into a trait he had bequeathed to me. Even in his destruction, he had to be the architect. You are delusional, Dad, I said. He just shrugged. Maybe, he said, but I am still your father, and you are still my daughter. You can sue us. You can bankrupt us. But you are made of the same stuff. Come on. Elaine, he said. Let's go talk to Henderson. He walked away, trailing smoke. My mother glared at me one last time, then followed him. A dutiful soldier in their war against reality. I walked to my car. My hands were shaking now. I sat in the driver's seat. I locked the doors. The silence of the car was a relief. My phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. I hesitated. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity is a curse. I tapped the screen. It was an audio file. No text. Just a clip. I tapped to listen. The sound was tinny, filled with static. It sounded old. Got her to send the checks. A voice said, it was my father, but younger. His voice was smoother. She is such a good girl. My mother's voice answered. She sounded young too. She thinks we are saving for her wedding. Laughter, the same laughter I had heard on the phone. But fresher, lighter. Wedding, my father laughed. Honey, that money is going into the boat fund. By the time she gets married, we will be sailing to the Keys. She is so gullible. My mother giggled. Our little angel, our little golden ticket, my father said. The clip ended. I stared at the phone. The date stamp on the metadata of the file, if I had bothered to look, would have been 12 years ago. This wasn't a recent corruption. This wasn't a good family that went bad because of a gambling addiction or a bad market turn. It was the foundation. They had been laughing at me since I was 21. They had been stealing from me since I got my first paycheck. The mockery wasn't a moment. It was a tradition. Who sent the message? Maybe Tyler. Maybe he found an old recording on a computer. Maybe it was his way of giving me the final piece of the puzzle, the piece that absolved me of any lingering guilt. I sat there, looking at the spreadsheet on my passenger seat. The total, $384,000. I had won the lawsuit. I would get the judgment. I might even get some of the money back eventually, after the forensic accountants stripped their assets and sold the boat and the house. But as I sat there, watching the sun dip below the courthouse roof, I realized I had lost something irretrievable. I had lost the version of myself who believed. I had lost the Madeline who thought love was a safety net. I had lost the girl who thought that if she just tried hard enough, if she just paid enough, if she was just good enough, she would be safe. That girl was gone. She had been regulated out of existence by risk analysis and subpoenas. I looked at my face in the rearview mirror. The eyes were dry. The jaw was set. I wasn't a victim anymore. I wasn't an angel anymore. I put the car in gear. I didn't look back at the courthouse. I didn't look back at the town of Silver Pine. I drove toward the highway, toward the city, toward the cold, clean, honest numbers. I was free. And the price of freedom was exactly $384,000 and one broken heart. I merged onto the interstate, turned up the radio, and for the first time in 8 years, I didn't wonder if my phone was going to ring. I knew it wouldn't, and that was the only receipt I needed. Thank you for listening to this story. It was a journey into the dark side of family dynamics, where trust is a currency and silence is a weapon. I hope Madeline's strength resonated with you. I would love to hear from you. Please comment below and tell me where you are listening from. Are you in New York, London, Tokyo, or perhaps somewhere quiet like Silver Pine? Let me know. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Revenge Stories. There are many more truths to uncover, and I can't wait to share them with you. Share your thoughts in the comments in English. I read every single one. Until next time.